Welcome to the Dental Efficiency Playbook. My name is Gabriel Hoffman, also known as the Dental Efficiency Guy, and I have a treat for you tonight. I have one of my longtime friends and an OG in the DSO and group management space. When it comes to operations, Kurt and I go way back to our Aspen days many years ago in large group space. And he's had a very interesting path since then. We worked together. I was there for about 7 years, and I know you were there during that time. And then he's taken a path to emerging groups, large groups, and most recently to a specialty group in his old home of Pittsburgh. And so, Kurt, welcome to the Dental Efficiency Playbook. It's awesome to have a good friend of mine as a guest tonight, and I personally am excited to hear about not only your path to your current position, but really you know, as we all know, we grow in the detours or the veers in life, right? The challenges, especially operationally, where we learn from the struggle and strife, unfortunately, more so than we do many of the wins. And so I'm excited to hear about those as well, and look forward to catching up with you tonight. Welcome to the show, brother.
Gabe, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Change doesn't happen because things are good. There has to be some pain involved. So, certainly I love the path. It's great to reconnect with you. And I think back to our time at Aspen working together. And that was a great partnership. And I'm looking forward to the partnership that we've rekindled here in the future. So happy to be on.
Yeah, you and me both. You and me both. I've enjoyed, I always enjoy our conversations and learning about your journey and where you are, and which is why I'm excited to uh to not only see your pretty face. Now you're clean shaven face. Last time I saw you, you had a nice little beard on you, but
Little Grizzly Adams action going on, I think.
looking good, bud. But it's yeah, good to see you again. And yeah, obviously, as we both know, um, now decades in operations, it's very different today. Um, Not only managing people from recruitment to numbers to costs and all the challenges that we face in dentistry, that some of them have always been there, but they're different in 2025 than what they were when we started. And um, you have it. I love the path that you've taken to where you are today, and would love to learn about that path to CEO as well. Um, when it comes to what you've seen, like where you are now, Kurt, how would you describe, operational efficiency or the challenges, managing a group today relative to maybe where we were 20 years ago?
Sure.
Geez,
Yeah.
close to 20 years, right? 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, we're dating ourselves for sure. I think back then we weren't talking artificial intelligence. That was a big piece. We were talking
True.
about behaviors in potential team members, candidates for the team that may not have been too far off of how we were raised and our personalities and what we're looking at. So you talk about, the Gen Z, Gen X, millennials and all that. If there's anything I've learned in business, it's probably two things. One, we don't have to do it differently than the other person. We just have to do it better. But we have to evolve. And sometimes we have to evolve, personally and professionally on a daily basis, or we risk, the business passing us by. And when I think about operations, you have to be an expert in behaviors. You have to understand human nature, and you have to be open to change. So for me, when I look back, I look back to where we were and what we were doing. Hiring talent to some degree was easier Nowadays, it's a lot more challenging because there's a balance between, do we leverage the technology, as we look to scale the business, or do we, look for that talent to come in that's going to help cross-pollinate and infuse some changes, help educate the team and raise them to a higher level. And that really demands, your ability, at least for me as an operator, being open to change. Sometimes, and I'll talk about this, I have 3 kids. I'm an empty nester. I love it. But my youngest does things that some days Gabe, I don't get it. I don't understand. So I finally called him up and I'm like, look, we just have to have a talk. I want to revisit this conversation from the other week. And, they're not telling me, that I'm right or wrong. And I'm not telling them they're right or wrong. I just didn't see things through their eyes at that time, and just being open. And I really believe, in this day and age, you have to be open to the idea that that team member, while you may not agree, more importantly, you may not understand where they're coming from. And it's so important to understand that. So the challenges today is you really have to be that expert and also have that balance with that technology piece, because it's a lot more robust today than it was back then.
Yeah, I think that's the elephant in the room, right? It's easy to know costs are higher, technology is dramatically different.
Yeah,
But I
human
think,
capital is the most expensive piece in the business. So,
but you hit the nail on the head, and something that any listener to the show knows, we in operations, in managing any group, developing any group, scaling any business. The business scales because of the culture, the foundation, right? A house is not built on the framing alone, it's built on a foundation, and people are the foundation to the culture.
100%.
A culture grows because of a combination of systems, processes, and people, right? Elevating people, giving them the path, supporting them on their growth journey. Without those people, it doesn't work, and no technology is going to replace human to human contact in dentistry.
Agree.
Technology is going to allow people to spend more time with impact and working on other people, right? Serving other people.
And you really touched on something that's near and dear to my heart. It's that culture piece. I live and breathe it every day. And, for me, when I think about my trajectory, Aspen had a great culture. I certainly learned a lot, but that didn't happen overnight. Culture evolution sometimes can take 2 or 3 years, and even with a smaller group, it takes time. So as you evolve and you hammer out that culture, it's so important, because for me, culture does drive everything. If you don't have a positive culture that resonates with the team, and more importantly, translates to that patient experience, I think you're going to end up dead in the water. You're going to struggle, and it won't matter how much technology you have involved and all the bells and whistles. It absolutely comes down to your people and the culture. I was talking to a colleague of mine, several months ago, and they were talking about the financial impact of driving down the finances, and at some point, you have to balance that with the conversations around culture, because you will lose culture if you just focus on the financial piece of it. So
It's so true, and that example is written all over groups of different sizes that have unfortunately gone through bank ownership or receivership in recent years that were surprises, because the top line is there. However, the bottom line wasn't, because of turnover and high expenditures in trying to replace the right people. When we focus, as you said, too much on scaling and adding practices as opposed to the operational efficiencies in those practices, right?
Yeah.
But one thing you said, Kurt, key behaviors. And I love it, because we can talk, so many people are talking KPIs, but KPIs are driven by the behaviors of the individuals,
Absolutely.
right? The people, and what people are doing. And if I when I was talking to an office I work with today about restructuring incentives to incentivize the behaviors, not incentivize the numbers, like the actual key performance, the KPI, because if we're incentivizing the behaviors, the KPIs are there. And in
Mhm.
fact, as we've seen in not only that practice, but other practices, when you reinforce the behaviors, the KPIs continue to grow above and beyond that number
Absolutely.
because the behaviors, as you said, build the culture,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And,
The
KPI, for me, and, anybody listening to this that's in business understands those key performance indicators, but it's really just a measurement and a goal. That's all it is. It's a measurement and a goal. And if you're running a business, you have an operation that doesn't have that, well, either everybody on the team's great or everybody on a team is not great, and you really need those measurements there to start creating separation, with the team, those behaviors, so you can be effective in your coaching and support. You're going to have your rock stars. You're going to have that 20% that are going to continue to knock it out of the park, love it.
Yep.
You're going to have that 20% that might need a different conversation. Maybe they're on the wrong seat on the bus. Maybe they need to be on a different bus. But really, for me, the rubber hits the road is that other 60% that make up that 100%. That KPI, to your point, you're managing those behaviors, leveraging strengths, but you want to influence them to get to that top 20%. So there's that incremental improvement and reinforcing those best practices, those behaviors through, or there just be recognition, which at the end of the day doesn't cost anything. To be able to say to somebody, nice job answering the phone, or maybe it's a quarterly or monthly incentive to really financially influence those positive behaviors. But at the end of the day, it does, to your point, it comes down to behaviors and how we manage those.
Yeah, and I think that's really good. I enjoy this conversation because um eh, accountability, empowered accountability between team members is a culture, right? It's a culture. And if people don't know their path, when people don't know their path to win, their path to success, and it's not aligned with the practice path, there's gaps, like sometimes gaping holes in that culture, and those holes are where people fall through. I see it because today I understand on a completely different level than what I did when we were working together many years ago. The importance of giving people, showing people, and supporting people on a path to growth. And then, like, once you give them the skills, the abilities, you're right, motivation, inspiration, trust that they're going to get there. It goes a long way, assuming that you have given them the role and responsibility, like the structure around that role and responsibility. Because when people don't have the framework to growth, it's like walking in the practice and walking like operating blindfolded. You're same with measurements. There is overkill with using the data, but if you don't have it, you're operating blindly, right?
100%.
Until your accountant gives you a report at the halfway through the following month, um, when it's not live day to day data that you can operationally impact. And so I am a huge supporter, if whether you're using third party metrics or you have your own metrics dashboard. um, I have a couple different companies that I especially like that are continuously developing their operational dashboards as well as the metrics that they pull. And so I am a firm believer, if you can't measure it, you cannot effectively manage it. How are you going to gauge true performance from one day to the next, as well as have operational insight to make changes? It The numbers tell the story. They're not the whole story,
Yep.
but they tell the story that allow you to then inspect, what the people are doing or what led to that result. And
Completely agree.
and so what are you guys using in your current life? Do you guys use a third party dashboard, or do you have integrated
Yeah. So,
metrics internally?
yeah. So, this is my first outing with a complete, specialty group or a board certified oral surgery group, referral based. So that, there were some nuances that I needed to learn about that business. Our software that we use, our practice management software, has a dashboard in it. It's a dashboard light. But I've looked at a few others out there, and I suspect at some point, because right now, Gabe, I'm what I like to call it, that I'm chopping down the trees. So like I've got the big issues, we're chopping them down. Eventually, we're going to get to that grass, and I'm going to be able to cut the grass and fine tune it. We will need to evolve our dashboard to something that is a little more robust. But right now, we're able to look at our collections based off of our production. We're looking at, patients being financially committed, our referrals, the things that are really important for us right now to tighten up the tolerances and making sure that, that hard work that our surgeons and our team are supporting, that we're getting compensated for that, and also, putting the other things in place. But yeah, it's an exciting time. So trees, and then eventually we'll get to the grass.
Awesome. I know, because we spoke, I don't know whether that was a week ago or a couple weeks ago, but potentially in the near future, maybe adding on to onto the house that is that as well is in the plans, correct? A little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, me, I like to grow the footprint. That's kind of my MO. So if I just came in to stabilize an organization, be like, okay, that's fun, and we're going to do it, and we're going to be successful. But there's so many patients in need. I mean, we're in Western Pennsylvania. I think you can pick any, typically any spot in the U.S., and you're going to find a demand somewhere that needs that help. So for me, that's where the rubber hits the road. I've got a strong group of surgeons. I mean, they're just exceptional rock stars. They have impeccable skills. The Google reviews speak for themselves. It's fantastic. Why wouldn't we want to expand and be in other areas? So we are looking at areas that are in need, that we can expand into, and it's important. The first part of it, though, was to make sure that we stabilize our core business, making sure we put those protocols and processes in place, that we generated a pipeline for talent, making sure that we leverage the technology effectively. But yeah, it's going to happen, and I'm excited for it. It's something we've talked about. So maybe on the next podcast, I'll be able to talk more about that. It'd be fun.
Yeah, and I trust me, I was not insinuating that you share strategy or things that haven't happened, but that's
trust
exciting.
me, I'm excited. I really want to get to the point where we can talk about it, and do more with that. So happy to have those conversations all day long.
I know that about you. Talk a little bit about that, though. The journey of coming in and identifying the challenges or opportunities, where you had to create SOPs, put structure in, maybe put some, create some positions, or put some structure around roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I look at my evolution, in the dental space, and really just operations to begin with, going back to my old retail days and whatnot. There's been different moments that have been historical markers for me. Even as simple as, taking a promotion to a larger multi-unit promotion, go back to even like a director of operations. I had to learn how to manage a team of regionals, not the way I manage myself as a regional, but the way a director of operations would. And so really wrapping my head around that, understanding the nuances of that corporate to field relationship. I didn't fully understand that part of it until I took my first C-suite position 10 years ago. And then I really understood, look, corporate's slow, okay? At the end of the day, in the field operations, you got to be quick, you got to be effective. Sometimes you're in a gray area, you got to make it happen. Corporate's slow, okay? And there's a reason for that. And so really for me, everything that I've done up until this day, somebody asked me once, well, why did you want to become a CEO? And years ago, I was like, oh, I want to be a CEO for X, Y, and Z. And I wasn't really able to articulate that until recently. I made this decision to be a CEO so I could be the CEO I never had. I've had fantastic mentors in my entire career, all through, whether it's the old retail world, certainly the dental space, people that are near and dear to my heart. I've learned a lot from, and I want to make sure that I'm a great mentor to others, coach and developing. But I've taken a lot of those best practices. I've taken things that have resonated with me and my personality. But I'll tell you, at the end of the day, it comes down to one simple thing. Even though I have all of this experience and I have a proven track record, I didn't know how I could help this group out until I met with them. I felt I could. I felt I had some tools, but it wasn't until I went through the interview process and did my due diligence that I was like, you know what, I can help them, and I want to be a part of their journey, so that was huge. And then getting in the mix, it's not just day one. I'm taking mental notes and I'm taking written notes, and I'm learning about their business. It is so important early on, at least for me and my MO, when I get involved with a group that is looking to scale and grow or whatever they're looking to do, that I can help them with. My first couple of months, I call it my diagnostic phase. I'm just getting to know people. I want to get to know the team. I'm a relator. That's part of my personality trait. I want to relate. I want to connect. I want to find out what makes them tick, how I can best support them. And that's where the rubber hits the road. How can I best support, that the front office person? Because if they're having a roadblock, well, that's my roadblock too. It's not just about serving our team and making sure that they're successful. It's getting down in the mix and what are those roadblocks? Because that roadblock may be rampant that becomes a protocol, a process. So early on, it's really the diagnostic phase, just understanding their business, thinking about how we can improve the process, the flow. And some of that stuff is transferable, things that we've learned, that are easy. It's like, okay, well, we need to get that done. That's great. And then there's some things that are unique, for example, being in a referral-based specialty. We don't have new patients just coming in, knocking on the door. They have to get that referral from a provider. So how are our relationships? How are our relationships with our GPs? Are we keeping in touch? General practitioners and keeping ourselves alive. So, that was the big part of it, for me early on.
I was, I knew you'd get to it, but I was curious actually what the big difference was. And that one came to mind is obviously, you can't just market. There's branding, but your clients or your target are the GPs and the referral channels. And so talk a little bit about in your journey. You said the CEO that you've never had. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What does that look like if you were to articulate when you were in COO positions or senior VP positions? What was the CEO that you envisioned that this is who I want to be?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So for me, when I think about the CEOs that, I've been able to partner with and meet and so forth, obviously, great people, great relators and so forth. But there's always been a disconnect from my experience that I've had with the people. I've had the opportunity to work with privately held companies, and there's a nuance there, and private equity based. And I've worked with small organizations and large matrix organizations. But there's a disconnect. And for me, coming from as a chief operating officer by trade in operations, you're with the people like day in and day out, like you're managing those behaviors. And if you lose sight of that, things can go off the rails. Again, it's not just about the KPI. Yeah, they have to be relevant, and it's not just about the reporting. It has to be accurate, and you need to be profitable. All of that, but there was always a miss with the teams and that connection, and maybe part of it is in the scale of business and how large it is. But I've also seen chief executive officers communicate in a thoughtful manner in large groups that have resonated and really spoke to the team members. We can't lose sight of that, at least for me. And I don't want to lose sight of that. That's so much, a big part of my enjoyment, seeing the team come together. They're learning these new skills. They're starting to trust in each other. And, there's speed and trust. So we're effective. We're seeing results. And And it's fun. You get that momentum and you're just along for the ride, and you're just high-fiving people. It's good stuff. Yeah, you're going to have your detractors, and that's a different conversation. But then it goes back to that culture piece. So for me, it really comes down to that culture about the team, making sure that we're, in an environment where people want to come in and have a great experience, and then they're enjoying their job.
I mean, while I love that, I would think that it creates a little bit, there's a little bit of a push-pull there, because you mentioned the C-suite moving slow, and largely executive committees are strategic in nature, whereas, operations, there's a balance between being strategic and being like just blocking and tackling, right? And connecting, as you said, connecting with people in the trenches, and seeing the red flags as well as the opportunities. And so in the trenches. So how do you, at this point in your journey, how do you balance that as a CEO?
So if I understand the question, how do I balance that operation planning, that strategic growth, and get everybody on board and on the bus and heading in that direction and keep
Well,
that?
yeah, because you said what you like is being connected to the people.
Mhm.
But by nature of your position, you're largely strategic,
Mhm.
and you have managers now. It may be a little bit different in the group that you're in now, but I'm curious if you can articulate how you balance, you know, the strategic aspect as a CEO
Mhm.
and the role there versus, when you're connecting with people in practices and operational blocking and tackling.
Yeah, absolutely. A big part of that, you have to be transparent. So for me, early on, we talked about my diagnostic phase. All right. Well, I put together an operation strategy, a plan, but that didn't happen until I did a SWOT analysis. So discussing the strengths, weaknesses of the group, and the opportunities and threats externally. And then I met with the partners, the board, and I put together the operation plan. This is what we need to work on, because I knew their vision. I knew what they wanted to do. They're like, hey, we want to be here next year or a year and a half. I'm like, okay, that's great. So this is what we need to do working back. This is what we need to start in first quarter. This is what we need to work on in the next quarter, and so forth. So we're already building out into 2026, this operation planning, and we're going through this. Well, part of that was to make sure that we had KPI in place so everybody understood what right looks like. So a lot of coaching and development went involved in that, because a lot of these team members had never experienced it. It was just like, hey, I show up, I do a great job, I've been here years. Well, yeah, you're probably great, but let's put some behaviors behind these metrics to make sure that you get recognized for it, so you're not being lumped in with those team members that maybe need a little more support to get there. And those are part of those conversations. But here's the other part of it. And I think now that you've asked that question, I believe I can articulate it a little better about that disconnect. It's that pulse to the community that's out there. So one of the things we're rolling out is a culture committee. And this is something that I experienced in my old world. It's something that I'm setting up. I will tee this up myself, but no one in leadership is going to be involved in this, Gabe, once it's up and running. So it's going to be team members from the different positions, some of them seasoned, been here for a long time, and some of them new to the organization. They will have a canned agenda that they will need to operate from, but they're also going to be able to come up with their own ideas. How are we doing out there? What do we need to course correct on? What are some of the benefits that they want to see? And they will have a monthly meeting, and then they will report to me what they're looking at. And I will be able to work with the partners, the board, the rest of the team on some of these ideas. Now, I've heard some great ideas already without even getting into this. And some of them may be things that we can't execute now, but working on a budget for next year, we can put in place for next year. But what ends up happening is by design, as we continue to grow, we don't ever lose sight and that connection with our entry-level team members, that somebody's already there who can talk about that onboarding process, that training process. Did we put a best-in-class process together, or did we miss the boat? Do we need to course correct and, make amends and tweak something? So that's a big part of it for me.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I love that culture committee, and that that it's going to be team members, empowering them to look through a different lens, as well as maybe step in, get a little uncomfortable in a new role and force them, that's where people grow. I love when you give people an opportunity, like that committee that you create, a project, and they're able to establish their footing and have a voice that they previously didn't
Yeah,
have.
and these things
Well,
may end up in the operation planning, the strategy that we put forth. This is exciting stuff for us. So,
building your bench there too. I like that.
a little bit.
So another thing that, you know, as you were talking and talking about that, there's a couple things that I wanted to note. I mean, while I understand the, um, and love the importance of a strategic plan, I equally love the fact that you're getting into, into the practices to understand. And I know that you know the inner workings of the operations, but that you're inspecting all these things and then giving your team an opportunity to be engaged in the development of these, as opposed to just taking your strategic plan and rolling that out, with a management team. So that's another aspect that I think is it's I'd like to, make sure that it's articulated, because that's a huge strategy, and continuing to build a culture too.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to your conversation around, the finance piece, that if we leverage the financials too much, we lose sight of that culture piece. There's that balance, and having a strategic, whether you want to call it a strategic plan and operating plan, that strategy, and then there might be some day-to-day tactical stuff you need to course correct on. But that's only one part of it. I mean, you need to be open to that feedback, making sure that your culture is thriving. And it doesn't matter what's on paper, you've got to have that feedback. You have a close connection with your team, making sure that you also create an environment that it's safe. Gabe, we don't have to like what we see or hear, but at least then we can fix it. So we have to have that environment where people just feel safe enough to say, you know what, you didn't do a great job on this, or you know what, this is horrible. I'm not happy. Let's talk about it. Maybe it's something we need to course
Yeah,
correct
that's
on
okay. That happens,
all the
right?
time, all the time. I had
But it
somebody
has to
today.
be
It's like, oh,
okay to make mistakes,
yeah,
right? It has to be
absolutely,
okay to make mistakes.
absolutely. I had somebody today about that. It's like, look, I'm just so grateful you reached out to me. Thank you so much. This is awesome. So
Yeah, well, and you mentioned the ideas that your team is giving you before you actually create this committee, or before it's rolled out, that you've already received. And it takes me back to, um, in crucial conversations, the pool of shared meaning is the birthplace of synergy, right? Giving them the opportunity, asking for their feedback, whether it can be implemented or not, is a massive strategy for, again, when you want brand champions, if they understand they have a voice, and even if it doesn't get implemented now, but it may be down the road, or that, again, that seed is planted, and who knows where it goes. Again, that is creating synergy in the organization, and and developing leaders at all levels throughout the organization. Which I I bring this up because, um, as I work with groups of different sizes, the the well-oiled machines, the groups that they have leaders at every single level of their organization, but they enable and empower the leadership at all the different levels of the organization. There is an art to doing that, which is why I love the conversation that we're having about what you're doing with the culture committee, and giving them an opportunity, no matter what level of the organization they're at, to share their voice
yeah,
and
so
their
important.
perspective.
Yeah, yeah, so important.
Um, what so connected CEO. So does that ever, in being that, have you run into any, again, along the lines of me mentioning the push-pull, any challenges where you know what needs to happen in the field. And it's very easy to want to implement it or course correct, but you have to be patient and persist with the strategy.
Every day. Yeah, and
I mean,
so how can you not? I mean, we're always looking for process improvement. That's how we're wired, right?
I ask Kurt because as I am a coach or consultant in practices, or I'm speaking to groups, I have had to learn to bite my tongue at different points, just listen, observe, and wait for the opportunity to address things. When I want to, I want to be like, oh wait, but have you
Unless
thought
it's
about
critical
this?
and it's gonna, we're gonna derail go off the tracks. You know what? It's just part of that plan, man. But eventually we're gonna get to the grass, So.
I one aspect of this show
Hmm.
that I know this is your first time being on it. I truly believe in transparency and honesty around the things that we see in the industry today.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, with you mentioned the technology and the needing to build the culture. But one thing that you said was um, you can't use the numbers alone, right? And you've had to coach your team on using the numbers. Um, there is a huge gap. There's many practices across the United States that people operate without having that measurement. So, can you articulate a little more when you're rolling out the coaching to KPIs?
Mhm.
Strategically and tactfully, what did that look like for you guys, Kurt? I
Yeah,
think
for
that
sure.
that's something that many people can really benefit from.
Yeah, sure. And you can build a better mousetrap. There's a ton of ways, to put reviews out there, put KPI. You have to know what's important to your organization. So for us, one of the first things that I addressed was our billing, making sure that we were collecting, all right, and whether it was through behaviors, really analyzing those clerical errors. Are we putting incorrect date of births in there or social security, whatever it is that's delaying those payments? We needed a means to track that. So that was part of it. And then it becomes, okay, well, if that's important and we want improvement, what are we looking at? Well, let's say we want a 20% improvement each month on errors, and last month was 400 errors. Okay, well, this month we want a 20% improvement, so we want to finish up at what, 320, and being able to drill down into the details there. All right. So the first step was really coaching to the idea that there are behaviors attached to numbers. Every line item in a P&L has a behavior attached to it in some way, shape, or form. So that's the education there for part of it. But the other part too, Gabe, is some of those core competencies of the position. Talking about teamwork, attendance, being punctual, communication, leadership. If you're in a leadership role, and we had team members in a leadership role, well, by design, your title speaks to leadership. Are you exemplifying effective communication? And if not, let's talk about what that is, and let's talk about how we can support you on getting there. So for me, it really became like a town hall meeting, getting everybody together, talking about it, over communicating through email, and then going to the practices and making myself available for those tough questions to sit down as a group or individually. One of the first things that I did when I started with the organization, and I am a firm believer of this, you put your cell phone up in the break room. It's not for the patients, it's for your team. Everybody needs to feel that you're accessible. And I'm not talking about that open door policy. That's a little old school for me. If somebody calls me and says, I've got a problem with my manager, okay, I'm going to listen to them, but I'm going to ask if they talk to their manager, and I'll be able to help support that conversation if need be. What I really want is for people to understand, and maybe this goes back to your earlier question about the CEO role, is I'm just here to support you. It's not about my title. Like, I'm here to support you. So let's make sure we're communicating, managing up. That's important. And let's talk about that KPI. So there's a lot of coaching and development that goes on. And this has gone on for a couple months. It took time because when you've been in a position for years and you've never been measured, yeah, there's going to be some fear around that. There's concerns. There might be some misunderstandings. And all we're asking is we just want the team to show up and be the best version of themselves. And we're going to be in their corner supporting them.
No, that's great. I mean, I know the education. I also firmly feel that people want to know. Your people want to know how to do a good job.
Yeah.
You have to give them the resources and the structure to understand how to win on a daily basis and win in their position. I think that so often when we hold back business education, like continuing to peel back layers and help our teams to understand how they can impact the business, they have to understand the business.
That's right.
And so, continuing to teach them about the metrics. You mentioned P&Ls, right? Not holding back. Like they need to understand not just how they impact supplies,
Mm-hmm.
but how do they drive? You know, um, are they accountable to their schedule? But taking that a step further, do they know what the practice goal is?
Mm-hmm.
Not just monthly, daily. Like the role they play in building the schedule, the role they play in leading to yes, right? That how they impact patient care, how they impact team growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I and I stress that because um, in my continued coaching, there's a true fear about educating your people, giving them too much knowledge on the financials in the business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about, you still have to have the checks and balances from a financial standpoint, so where credits and debits are going. But at the same time, um, if you want people to fully understand, be entrepreneurs in your business, you have to share with them and continue to share with them not just the metrics that they impact, but the metrics of the practice.
Well,
I
I
love to
agree.
show not just providers, but people in the practice when we're walking through, for instance, with a hygienist. I want them to see what our other hygienists like. I want their not to create a competition that's going to offend people, but to give them relevance and understanding that if there are individuals on our team doing it, then absolutely you can achieve this. I personally um, am am a firm believer in you not only using metrics in huddle, but obviously operationally tying back goals to those metrics that they can see on a daily basis, and understanding that if we're rolling out a goal, that this is where you will see, this is where we will see on a daily basis the impact of that change, of that implementation. And I know that's something that's very micro, but yet it is underutilized. The structure around continuing to educate on not just the metrics, but but how we impact those, and then the consistency around the training with those metrics. So
Absolutely.
I love that we were talking about that. So where do you see, strategically, where do you see um, with rising costs? Again, we know the challenges. You mentioned the technology. Where do you see the rest of 2025 going from a strategy standpoint as you scale these practices and look at potential future additions?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, thankfully, we're in a position where, the business is healthy. We are improving, our collections and, improving our net worth. I don't think for us, the rest of 2025 is going to impact us. The challenge is going to be next year. The challenge is going to be, as we continue to stabilize and really reach that point where I affectionately call it, you get that momentum. Like, you're running 8 out of 8 cylinders. Okay, well, the trick isn't just fixing or improving something after the fact. The trick is getting ahead of it before that curve hits, and what are we doing to stay ahead of it? So I know at some point, probably sooner than later, Gabe, we are going to look into AI a little more. We're going to look into some more of that technology. One of the first things I wanted to address was the human capital piece, making sure that, we're creating that best-in-class onboarding training program and that we hire right the first time and we treat people like we want to keep them, so we have that retention, because that in and of itself, you're going to see a 3-4% improvement in your revenue just by people staying involved, and then staying relevant and effective with the KPI, to your point, making sure that, okay, this worked for us now, but we may need to change the KPI we look at next year to address some other things, because there are threats on the horizon. And I think we all know that these threats on the horizon, they may impact people differently. I can't even tell you what those might be for us. I want to make sure that when it happens, whatever that looks like, we're ready for that we've got the team in place. And, to your point, the AI, we've got options today. I'm sure there's something there that can help us improve our net worth and, maybe even be more attractive, for that talent out there.
Yeah, I mean, I like to reframe how we think about AI today, because AI is everywhere. AI has been in medicine for 10, 12 years before it came to dentistry, and diagnosis as well as prognosis. And in dentistry, the opportunity we have is allowing people to reclaim time, to redirect it to impact. So when you think about AI and you have the ability for people to not stare at a computer for 4, 6, 8 hours a day, or on the phone all day with redundant processes, and instead they can present treatment, or they can a patient come in, they can stand up, greet them, and take them on a tour of the practice and actually engage, or maybe spend extra time on the phone with them, asking questions and learning who they are.
Mm-hmm.
What impact is that going to make in the practice?
Yeah.
Not only in your patient satisfaction, your acceptance, but the top line and the bottom line. And that is the opportunity that we have right now when we're looking at our team, and to reallocate time to impact, true impact.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives us the opportunity to, you mentioned, the patient experience, but maybe add an extra wow factor, because now we have more time than what we had previously.
Yeah. And, I think about it, I don't know how we're going to leverage AI. I believe we will. We're doing stuff with our website that's going to, the updated site will go live in a couple of weeks, and there's some AI components there.
Awesome.
But I think about our team members and their needs. Not everybody wants to be a business owner anymore. They want more quality of life. Is there some AI component that would improve the quality of life of our team members, and take some more stress off of them, financially, they maybe improve their net worth or whatnot. I don't think anybody's looking to lose that, but ensuring that they're able to, in their mind, meet whatever quality of life that they're looking for. It's different today. The idea of, look, I'll just go back to my first year and first few years in the dental space when I didn't have to work a weekend. I came from retail, Gabe. All right. You work 7 days a week. Having a Saturday and Sunday off was mind blowing, let alone an evening. So, that's then. Here we are, umpteen years later. People want to spend more time with friends and family. I think that's more important today, whether it's been forced through the pandemic and other changes, or just better, healthy living. And how can we support that as a company? So that's what I'm interested in.
That's a good point. And when you give people the options, then it's within their power to choose. Do I want more time, or do I want to take another path that maybe will lead to a new position or growth in the
Mhm.
organization,
Yep.
right? And neither is wrong. It's okay, because now we have the extra time. But you hit the nail on the head. There's the joy aspect there, right? Within the culture, right? Are people, are they elevated, their happiness, their engagement in the organization? Are we able to create brand champions because now the role has completely changed as a result of the implementation of
That's right.
technology? That is what I love, not just about AI, but about the proper implementation uh, in in, uh, in organizations. Um, so, Kurt, what is besides the KPI and the metrics? You know, now as a CEO um, in a specialty group that's growing, what is your advice, if you were to summarize in one sentence your advice to someone that they're in the throes of early growth, struggling, with the rising costs and the difficulty finding people today. I hear it all the time. You don't have to look at too many threads to see where there's a lot of frustration there. What's your advice operationally, or your advice to you know uh, your earliest self when you're figuring things out?
Yeah. Um, I think it's twofold. Trust the plan. If you have a goal, keep the goal. The rookie mistake is, to just throw the plan out because you're not getting there. Don't throw the plan, or get rid of the goal. Just tweak it. So be open to the fact that you might have a plan to get to your goal, but you might not need to change your plan a little bit. So being open to that, but trust the process. That's the important piece. That really sums up the first one. Trust the process. The other one, it takes time, but you got to trust your team. Like, you have a team in place, aces in their places, leverage their strengths. We're not
Yeah,
asking everybody to be perfect.
that's
I'm
good.
asking for progress. I'm not asking for perfection. And yeah, there's some do's and don'ts, but at the end of the day, trust the team. It's funny. The other day I was, going on some stuff, and for me personally, one of the things I need to be aware of as a leader is, when things start going well and we're hitting 8 out of 8 cylinders, I can end up being a taskmaster. So I just come across as that taskmaster, like, okay, great, let's do that. All right, let's do the next thing. Boom, 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 boom. And I have to slow down. And that's something that I need to be cognizant of, is like, I need to give myself pause. But I've also given my team permission. I've shared this with them. And I had one of my team members the other day was like, Kurt, and they brought it up, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're right. Like, no, you guys, thank you. Like, thank you. And it's
Oh,
just,
that's awesome.
let's have fun with
You
it.
welcome it.
Yeah,
You're open
absolutely.
to it.
Absolutely. And thank them for just being on the team, because they're going to run with me. But you know what? I also need to be cognizant of the fact that, I just need to give thanks and pause sometimes too.
I like that. Aces in their places.
Mhm.
We all have unicorns on our team that, as you said, maybe they're in the wrong place, but do you know what their goals and motivation, all the people that work in your organization, or do your managers, your leaders in the organization know the goals and motivations of all the people that they manage?
Yeah,
Because if you're not actively having those conversations, you don't know.
no,
And in those conversations, as we know, um, sometimes they're pretty enlightening. And as you said, people will end up in a completely different position, or you'll give them a project that you didn't even realize they were excited or motivated to
yeah,
try.
yeah,
And people will definitely surprise you, run with it. but use those as trials, use those as opportunities to see,
Absolutely.
like, and share that, articulate that. Hey,
Mhm.
I'm going to give this to you. This is the first time. Let's see how you do with this. The door is open if you need support, or connect them with somebody that's going to support them. But don't be afraid to empower. As you said, create aces in their places, find the unicorns in your business, because it's always less expensive than recruiting a bunch of people, putting job ads out and getting frustrated because you're not finding
Yeah.
that unicorn. You're not finding that star that you're looking for. You might have them in your business already. I can promise that
100%.
you have at least a couple that you just haven't. You either they haven't found their footing yet, or you haven't given them an opportunity yet, or they don't feel like they have the opportunity yet. So that's where I can't stress enough, um, having those intentional conversations,
Mhm.
and empowering your team to do the same, and create. I love that you've created a voice at all levels of your organization. You're enabling people to grow from the bottom up, and that's fantastic. uh i I think what we just summarized or talked about here in the last couple minutes of this is really the highlight of our conversation tonight for me, because I think that, um, there's a need for it in dentistry. We can't recruit people fast enough, but can we spend a little extra time with the team members that we have and understand that they are human, and ask questions like understanding the humanity before their position, and support them on that level to then, um, again, lift them up, work them through something, and again, people will surprise us.
All the time.
I'm not
All the time.
there's a time when when people are better suited on another bus, but man, people can't learn to drive if they're not shown how.
Agreed.
And I think that is a big takeaway for tonight, and something that I know throughout your career you've been very good at. So, no, it's been awesome speaking to you. Thank you for being for joining the Dental Efficiency Playbook. It's been long overdue. We've been trying to make this happen. So I'm glad we had the opportunity to talk tonight.
Well, my
Um,
pleasure. Pleasure's all
yeah.
mine.
So
Great
Kurt,
experience.
if anybody out there wants to connect with you,
Mhm.
what's they want to talk about something they heard tonight, or maybe connect on operations. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Send me a message. Happy to connect, and send you my email, and we can talk shop, whatever you need. I'm happy to cross pollinate and learn from you too. So looking forward to it.
Absolutely. On LinkedIn, you are Kurt Swager, not Curtis, right?
Yep.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
as it is on the screen. Awesome. Hey, again, thank you, my friend. I really enjoyed speaking with you tonight. It's been an honor to dive in. I know that some of it was micro, but I think there really were some amazing insights, tips, tricks, and honestly, when it comes to culture and people, some cheat codes.
Mhm.
So we checked all the boxes tonight, and I absolutely love that you joined us. So the
Fantastic. I
pleasure
enjoyed
is
it. Thank you
definitely
so
mine.
much for having me. Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.